Do you think young Catholics today are drifting towards more traditional practices, and why? Will your kids go to Catholic school, public, or homeschool? Where does a person start if they are wanting to learn more about the Catholic faith? Thoughts on spanking, etc. Welcome to the Trad Line on the go. Featuring Cash and Charlie. And we'll just record for as long as Francis stays asleep. What would you do if you lived in Charlotte? So sad for our diocese regarding the leaked document.
Oh, wow. I would either, depending on where I lived, I'd go to wherever they put it. Well, so first of all, of course, okay, this is killing me. Or I would go to St. Anthony's Chapel.
Sorry, you would go to what?
Where they moved it. But here's the thing. The good news is, and I don't know, because actually I think it was announced this yesterday, or maybe the day before that, so this person might not know.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those restrictions have been postponed until October to revisit.
Mm-hmm.
And some things coming out of the Vatican, it seems like perhaps Pope Leo might relax some of those restrictions. So it might not be as bad as we first anticipated, but I would go to either Mooresville if that were close, or I would go to St. Anthony's Chapel, which is the SSPX Chapel in Charlotte.
Yeah, which is a good segue because we got two questions that are good follow-ups to that. One was, how do we feel about Pope Leo now that he's been in his position for a month?
What I would say is there have been some good things and some bad things. He's had some appointments that have been really bad. He had that one nun who he put to like the dicastery of religious life. The new bishop of St. Gallen is not very good. The new head of the JP2 Institute for Life is not great. So there's that. But then there's also other things, which is apparently Cardinal Roche, who has been kind of the main driving force behind the Traditionis Custodes and the Latin Mass situation, has been removed apparently. Like certain things like in St. Peter's and in just Rome, Pope Francis didn't allow Latin Mass to go on in these different basilicas, in the Roman basilicas. St. Paul's had Walls-Head Institute of Christ the King. There was another one I can't think of. But anyway, so there's certain things like that have been good. Pope Leo said some good things. He said some things about, marriages between a man and a woman, which is kind of crazy that we even have to say like, oh, that was so good of him to say, But that's where we are. What did he just said something this week that I can't remember. The thing between a man and a woman.
Oh, the cohabitation.
Yeah, the cohabitation thing.
That was this week.
That's right, that was this week, which is really good. And then the other thing is that he said marriage is not an ideal, right? So that was something famous that Pope Francis said was it was like some sort of ideal. And the big thing about that sort of thing is those sorts of ambiguities is the Catholic Church has always taught that every moral law is attainable, meaning you can live up to it with God's grace. So to say that something living in a certain way is an ideal is an error. So that's it was really good for Pope Leo to affirm it.
Okay, I don't know where the question went, but someone asked if we didn't have access to a traditional Latin Mass, if we would go to, if we didn't have access to like an FSSP or institute, if we would go to SSPX. The answer is yes, we would.
So first of all, of course, the SSPX is Catholic. The Vatican has said this multiple times that they are within the church, even if there's some arguments that they're irregular or whatever. It is a Catholic rite. They do pray for the Pope and the local bishop. Actually, ironically, Bishop Martin just sent St. Anthony's Chapel a picture when he was a new bishop there, a picture so that he sent them his official portrait to hang in their chapel there. Look at this steeple. Show them this steeple. That's
Look at this steeple, you guys. Oh,
that's
wow.
Hilarious. Nashville is Protestant Central over here.
Yeah.
But they are Catholic. Ecclesia Dei has said this. The apostolic apostolic visitators, I think is how it's said. Let me just start over.
Okay.
The apostolic visitators, which was Bishop Snyder and another one, both said they're Catholic, they're great, wonderful. So those people are given the authority from the Vatican to go and kind of figure this out. So that was an official mission from Pope Francis. Obviously, he's given the faculties. And here's the biggest thing. When you charge somebody with schism, especially when the church has not said these people are in schism, you have to understand that you're making a grave accusation. So my sort of MO when people say that to me is to say, are you willing to bet your salvation on it? And the reason I say that is because you are. So what that means is if you make grave accusations, it is a grave sin to do it falsely, okay? So if you're willing to meet God and say, yes, me going to heaven or hell, I'm willing to stake the canonical status of the SSPX on this, meaning charging them with schism, then you are technically free to do so. But I certainly wouldn't do that. And it doesn't do you any good to make these pronouncements. And by the way, everybody who does say that, of course, is wrong. And they always have the most sort of specious arguments against it. And it's honestly, it's one of those things that drives me nuts. I've actually never even been to an SSPX chapel.
Yeah. Our friends go to an SSPX chapel. They go and they love it. They say they have the best community they've ever had. And the people there are just so kind and wonderful. People throw it around. People throw like SSPX is in schism. They throw it around so in like such a lackadaisical. What's the word I'm looking for? Lackadaisical.
Nonchalant.
Yeah, and they throw it around in such a nonchalant way, and you do hear it from these people all the time. So when you hear it all the time from so many people, it can make you think like, oh, that's not so that like we can just say that.
Yeah.
But I think Kyle's point is like you can't just say that. It's such a serious thing to say.
Yes.
And so.
And not only that, but most people haven't really seriously looked into it. And I find most people with not much experience, like they will lump everybody in.
Yeah.
So for instance, a lot of people think the SSPX is Satinist, which it's specifically not. So it's just those sorts of things. It's there. First of all, you don't have the authority to make a pronouncement on it. Even if you were to think they are in material schism, they are not formally in schism, which is the canonical crime. But 99% of people cannot make the proper distinctions to figure it out, and you don't have to. So it does you no good to do this, and it's not worth the risk. And you are risking your soul making those sorts of things. So it's a very difficult thing, and it's not a clear thing, right? So obviously something like a Protestant is a perfect example of something that's a much easier thing to do, or an Eastern Orthodox. And that's another thing, by the way, just real fast, is the other thing along this line where people are more charitable. No, it's 55. Everyone's going
Watch
so
out.
slow.
Vehicle on shoulder ahead.
I wonder if people get pulled over like nobody's business over here. But anyway, if you're more charitable towards Protestants or Eastern Orthodox than you are towards the SSPX, then that is a personal problem. And that's the sort of thing that I would say shows a sign of a lack of maturity, spiritually speaking, because it's such an insane and inverted take.
I can't find it, but wait, it's right here. Wait, no, it's not. Where is it?
That was smart to screenshot them.
Yeah. Are you a Satinist or a Cantist? I've heard it said both ways. I don't know which way is correct.
I think it's a tomato situation.
Yeah. Or do you recognize and resist SSPX? Wait. It says recognize and resist, and then in parentheses SSPX.
Yeah, I think, because what people say, the SSPX are recognize and resist, meaning you recognize the authority of Rome, but you resist them in the errors or in certain ways.
Oh, okay.
And so that's what I think it means.
So neither. We go to FSSP, so. Okay. Will your kids go to Catholic school, public, or homeschool? We homeschool.
Holy crap, where was that?
Right there. We are homeschooling, and we got another question about how we homeschool. So I would say right now, since they're still, obviously our oldest is almost 6, so I think I started doing some reading and writing with him when he was around 4, but very much only when he wanted to do it. And my main thing was trying to get him excited to learn and kind of build a love for learning. I think that's the most important thing when they're young. Nothing too structured, nothing you have to sit down for this amount of time and do this amount of work. So at least for Cashin, he responded to that very well. So I would say things like, oh, this book that you love, wouldn't that be so fun if you could read it yourself?
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Oh, yeah. And then I would just get him all pumped up, like, okay, then you have to, learn your letter sounds and learn how to blend. So with the main thing we focused on is reading.
You train Charlie?
Now we're starting to do a little bit of math, but nothing crazy. Another thing about homeschooling is it's all very individualized. So Cashin might start earlier than Charlie does, or vice versa, with the more structured learning. And we're going to do an episode. I'm going to force my mom to do a homeschool episode with me because she's the queen of homeschooling. And so we'll do that. Hopefully, Cashin.
As he making some faces.
Yeah. Big reasons we are homeschooling. Well,
versus some good Catholic school.
Yeah, versus public school or even a Catholic school, which in my opinion can be just as bad or worse than a public school.
It depends on the school, but
yeah. We don't want our kids being influenced by their peers for multiple hours a day, 5 days a week. While they're young, at least, we want their influence to be us, their parents. And so that's one of the big things. 2, I think it's totally horrible to force kids to sit at a desk for multiple hours a day, especially boys. They need to be up and active and doing cartwheels and digging in dirt and all that kind of stuff. Lots of sensory stuff, at least until they're a certain age. So that's another big reason. And am I missing?
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to be away from them now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we don't want to be away from them for 6-7 hours a day. We would just miss them. And yeah, so that's another big reason. Uh-oh. And is that Francis?
No, that was Charlie.
That's Charlie? Okay, any specific prayers for your children you pray? With my morning prayers, I say my morning offering, and then at the end, I'll pray for like my specific virtues that I want to get better in. I'll pray for Kyle and the virtues that I think he needs to get better in. No, I'm just kidding. No, just in general. And then usually I say, it's hard to remember word for word when I'm not actually saying it, but I think I say for my children's vocation that they always stay like on the, oh gosh, what do I say? I pray for the vocations every day.
Yeah. That
we all die as saints and that we're all preserved from mortal sin. Those are like the 3 main things that I'd say we pray every day for them, right? Mm-hmm. Anything specific that you do, or that's kind of the 3 things?
No, that's really it.
Yeah, those are the 3 things.
And I have one bookmark that has a prayer of parents that's just like, for help.
Yeah.
As a parent, with being even keel, not being too harsh or not being too soft, blah, 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 that sort of thing. I forget what it's called.
Yeah. A lot of people don't think to pray from preservation from mortal sin. I think a lot of people think like, well, it's going to happen at some point, which is not true. And I think that's a very important thing to pray for. So that's one of the bigger ones I would say that most people don't really think about. We got a few similar type questions on discipline of our children, thoughts on spanking, etc.
We do spank, not very often, and in general, when we do spank, it is for an act of deliberate disobedience, especially if it's continued disobedience. So I'd say in general, don't spank. So like, they might get spanked a couple times a week or something like that.
You think that often?
I don't know.
No.
Maybe less. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not very often.
And it's not very hard.
Yeah, it's not very hard. It's more sort of that like Pavlovian response. So it's an immediate thing that they understand. And then the other big thing is that we are very careful to not do it in anger, but then also to not mete it out in a way where it causes sort of anxiety. So I think, especially, at least like when I was being raised, a lot of folks can do this sort of thing where it's like, oh, wait till your dad comes home, or okay, now we're gonna go over here and I'm gonna go get my special wooden spanking spoon or just whatever, and the children have this tremendous anxiety and anticipation, which that
was always the worst part of spanks, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and I don't see the benefit in it.
Yeah.
it's that the spanks for me makes more sense when it's similar to like from the psychological perspective of putting your hand in the fire, where it's an immediate thing that's like a sort of reminder. Because the other thing that I think with the response that happens is like, if your child is afraid and they're saying like, please don't spank me, and you power through that and do it anyway, I think there can be some residual effects of that can happen, which is, this is like, and sometimes especially when they're young, the brain isn't they're not connecting it as much with that thing that you're spanking for.
I feel like the way we do it is like it's like a snap them out of it type thing. And I usually call them swats, not spanks. I feel like that's a better description of how we do it.
Here comes Frank.
Oh yeah, Francis is awake, so I have to cut it a little short. But so if they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing, and we say stop, and then they stop, and maybe they start doing it again. It's almost like a surprise swat.
And it's not really on the second try. It's more like a third or fourth.
Yeah, it's more of a third or fourth, and it's not like I was saying before. It's not like, oh, let's do it as hard as I can so they feel pain. It's more of like
He's doing well.
Yeah.
Dad. Hi, Princess.
More of kind of like a shock them out of it. So it's like, it's not about smacking their butt on their bare butt as hard as you can. I don't think we've ever done a bare butt spank.
No.
It's more of like a, snap them out of it, and to them it's more of like the surprise and shock of it, not like, oh, that hurts so badly. And like Kyle was saying, I have this dread of getting a spank type of thing. So, yeah, that's, I'd say, our approach on spanking.
But the important thing is that we're very big on doing the correction early and often. So it's like you're constantly doing it. You're not giving them too many warnings. You might give them one warning, like they didn't know they shouldn't be doing that. Yeah. But for instance, if something's ever an issue where, let's just say, there's a lot of whining going on or whatever, then it's whining is an automatic timeout. Like misusing a toy or just something like that, it's an automatic, you're losing that sort of thing.
Taking away.
And it's quick and it's constant, so that they're not getting to the point of thinking they can manipulate with their emotions, or that what you say doesn't mean anything because everything is an idle threat.
A lot going around these days with timeouts, like, oh, timeouts are terrible because you're isolating them and they're by themselves. It's like, hey, no screaming still, please. First of all, I think there are right and wrong ways to do timeouts, and it depends on the age. When they're older and they understand, you need to separate yourself from the situation, or you need to go into this room and collect yourself and change your attitude before you can come back out. I think that's really good for them. They're in a safe place. They know they can come back out to me, but they have to first or to us, do whatever correction they need to do. If it's a small thing where it's like, okay, go to the corner and count to 10, I'll do that for like a quick reset. I feel like I'm very anti-gentle parenting. I was thinking about the way when our kids, like if they get hurt, or I guess mostly if they get hurt, the way there's a thing that goes around that's like, oh, don't say you're okay or don't say you're fine to your kid when they're hurt, because it like, they say like, oh, it discounts how they're feeling, which I think is just a bunch of bull.
Well, not only that, but it's ridiculous, because guess what? Your feelings have no bearing on the truth.
Yeah, and not only that, but it's like, but they actually are fine. So like you said, even if they're feeling a certain way, it's like, no, but they are fine. And not only that, the whole, and maybe you can explain some more detail, the whole like mindset of, even as adults, like, and kids, this self-talk where like, if you're saying you are something, your brain will start to believe it, right? So like, we're very big on not saying to our kids like, you are something. We'll say maybe like, oh, you're acting this certain way, start acting that certain way. So
Charlie,
stop. Is it
Charlie,
too nutty back there?
Charlie, share with Cashin, please.
No.
But I was thinking that applies to when they're scared or hurt too. So if you're saying to your kid like, oh, I know you're scared, I know that was so scary, like, oh, I know that hurt so bad, it's like, that's gonna actually probably make them feel worse. When you guys talk about marriage before kids, I feel like I always hear about Catholic marriage in terms of family life, but my husband and I haven't been blessed with kids yet. We can't really speak from experience about marriage before kids because we only had 9 months. We only had 9 months of that.
Okay, so so first of all, of course, we did not have a long period of time where we were married without kids. It was 9 months, and Olivia had a very difficult first trimester, but in general, you know, we were just really focused on getting adjusted to married life. But as far as what you can do if you are married for a few years and you're trying to have children, it's just not going that way. I would say take the time, of course, to develop the friendship and the relationship, but also really focus on growing in virtue and holiness, especially as it relates to prayer, things that can't necessarily be done as easily when you have children. So of course you can grow in holiness and everything when you have children, but the prayer side of things, you only have so much time, right? So to grow and to
build habits,
to have a spirit of prayer, to have the virtue of prayer, and then also just other virtues, right? Because virtue is the measure of holiness, and developing that so that you'll be a better parent, you'll be a better spouse, etc. when the time comes. So that's what I'd say to really focus on, is just your personal holiness. You do that, you're going to naturally become a better spouse.
That's a good answer.
Thanks. Also, you can just do things that are a lot harder than when you have kids, like travel.
That's a great point. We had kids right away, and we always say, well, we would never change it, obviously, but we didn't get time. We didn't get like a whole lot of time to just like do things together. So there's no harm in enjoying life and doing things that maybe you can't do with kids or that are harder with kids. Kind of take advantage of that while you can. And then from a practical standpoint, I would say, is as a wife and mother, there are a lot of good habits you can try to start building before you have kids, because of course everything is a little bit harder when you have kids. You're busier, you're more tired. It can be really easy to prioritize motherhood above other things, especially when it's the first baby. I experienced that for sure. I kind of was full-time mom and not really wife. Like I didn't do both. I kind of just did the motherhood part. So just getting into like getting in the habit of like doing routines, whether it's just like your homemaking and house routines, getting in the habit of just doing the dishwasher every morning no matter what, doing your laundry right away, not letting it sit, learn new recipes, learn like the basics of cooking, like all of these things, all of these skills that you want to build for you do them for your husband, but you're going to be doing it for your children as well. So just getting into the habits and the mindset of wife, homemaker, mother, and getting really strong in those things so they carry into motherhood when things get a little more hectic, much easier. I know 2 people very well who, one of them got married. It took them 3 years to get pregnant. She's due in a couple months now. But she just was a full-time, devoted homemaker and wife. And she learned all of these things. Sourdough.
Watch out. Vehicle on shoulder ahead.
Sourdough, recipe, doesn't matter. Just anything that, even just preparing the home, like physically, getting it beautiful, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm just babbling now. So anyways, those things as well. What's your advice to get young children into participating in Mass?
I don't think you have to worry about them participating at Mass. If they're under the age of reason, especially, you're trying to get them to practice good habits. But as far as participating, whatever that, like if you mean making answers or really paying close attention, I wouldn't worry about it. I think you just worry about them behaving in general. As they get older, you might, make them stand and kneel and everything to have the proper postures, and maybe say, pay attention at the consecration, but
you don't want to put too much pressure on yourself for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's something that kind of comes naturally if you're bringing them to Mass from a young age, and then as they get older and if they're better listeners, you can start implementing that stuff more. How did y'all meet? We have a whole episode on this. Episode 1.
Yeah.
Listen to episode 1. And that's how we met. Okay, my husband isn't Catholic. I had a strong reversion a few years ago. It's causing a lot of stress and disconnect. Any recommendations? Meanwhile, my kids can see my Catholic faith getting stronger and my husband pushing back on it. It's a very heavy cross.
But for this one, I'd say keep in mind 1 Corinthians 7:14, which says the unbelieving husband is sanctified by his wife. And keep in mind that it is a heavy cross, but of course that is the cross that God has destined for you to bear. So it's your path to holiness and to heaven. As far as with your children, I don't know what this, you didn't kind of give the details about what the story is. I would do everything in my power to have them baptized if they haven't been, and make sure you raise them in the Catholic faith. As far as your husband, pray and fast for him, have masses said for him, keeping in mind, Father Ripperger talks about this a lot, which is anything that we ask for God, there's a certain amount of sort of prayer and fasting merit, so to speak, that needs to be attained to get that thing. So the quicker you do it, the more that you heap upon it, the faster it will happen, keeping in mind that, of course, it happens in God's time. And understanding also that, of course, it's God's will that your husband be converted, so you can pray with confidence, pray as if it's been done, as it were, and you can have confidence that God will deliver, but in his own time. So that's what I would say for that. And
where does a person start if they're wanting to learn more about the Catholic faith? The Tradline podcast.
Good. I don't know if this person is a Catholic or a Protestant, so if you are a Protestant and you're thinking, do I want to convert? And I just want to know what the Catholic Church believes and things. So, as far as learning more about the tenets of the faith, the Roman Catechism, as well as the Baltimore Catechism, are very helpful things. If you're a Protestant who's kind of saying, I'm Protestant, I don't really understand what the Catholic faith is, or, I know some things, but I'm not really sure why the Catholic Church says that particular thing. Catholic Answers is a good starting point. There's some issues there, but with the very basic stuff, like why do Catholics pray to Mary, or Catholic Mass, or the Bible, or whatever, they're quite good. So they can be that's Catholic.com. They can be a good resource there. But as far as if you're a Catholic, I would highly suggest going back to those catechisms. The Faith by John Hardin is also a good one, and those are really good places to start. Actually, who has a good, especially when it's not political commentary, I think Taylor Marshall's channel can be very, very good for his theological posts and things.
Do you think young Catholics today are drifting towards more traditional practices, and why? Tell me what to say so I can sound smart answering.
I'd say overall, yes. Of course, I think the biggest thing is, first of all, a lot of the changes in the banality of the Novus Ordo were for a point in time, right? So like the style of music, the style of decoration, it was very much of its time, the 70s and 80s. And so that aesthetic does not appeal to a lot of, younger people. And I think there is just a desire for something to be set apart, right? So that's really what sacred means, set apart for God. And there's, in the tradition of the church and in the traditional liturgy, there is a clear otherworldliness of it, which does not necessarily exist in the average Novus Ordo. And even, by the way, within the Novus Ordo, the more reverent and other, like, you know, the unicorn ones, it's the same sort of thing. There's an otherworldliness that's attractive. Again, where it's clearly sort of supernatural is the idea. And because we've been so secularized, there's a desire for the supernatural. And that's why I think so many young people are going back to it. And also, I think there's also a certain element with the internet and things is you realize, I think a lot of people realize so many things are a lie, so many things they've been told are true that aren't. And, you know, things they've been force-fed, and there's, I guess, a natural aversion to that and a desire to, you know, go back. I mean, it's the same sort of thing with the family, even non-Catholics. Of course, you know, birth rates have been plummeting for a long, long time, but there's also a resurgence of young families, you know, with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 kids, etc. And I think it's that refocus, gone away from it, you know.
Yeah.
It's a reaction to that consumerism, I guess you could say.
That is like word for word what I was going to say.
You're too funny.
How do you manage raising 3 boys? I have twin boys and a third boy's on the way. The only thing I can really think of, and this is kind of for parenting in general, is you're going to have areas of weakness in your parenting, whether it's, you know, times of you feel like you have a lack of patience or you're losing your temper. Whatever it is, just pinpoint them and then go to confession as often as you can and confess those things. You'll get extra grace to get better in those particular areas. And then, of course, every morning, say your morning offering and then pray for those specific areas and virtues as well every morning. And I think I like what you said one time, Kyle, with parenting, when you're like maybe feeling stressed out or like frustrated in a particular situation. Don't you have that thing you think of where it's like older people have said if they could go back in a time machine, even just what was that quote? That was such a good quote.
Oh, it's not a quote.
Or
it's
not,
just the
thing you saw.
So yeah, no. What my point was is that if I think of myself as an 80 or 85-year-old person, would I? What would I do to have, you know, just a few more minutes with them as kids again?
Yeah.
And I think any parent who's had kids grow up even a little bit, you know, like sometimes when we watch videos of Cashin or even Charlie, but especially Cashin as he's a little older, you see him when he had his own personality, but he was, say, 2.5 or 3. You know, of course it's the same kid, but in a certain sense, it's also a completely different kid,
yeah.
Right? And so you don't have that around. So that's what, you know, just puts it into perspective.
Yeah, things are, you can't avoid the chaos and the hard moments, so you just have to get yourself to a point where you can try to just get through them well and in a way that makes you holier and not, you know, just frazzled and stressed out all the time. So
it's also a decision. You don't have to be stressed about things.
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah. You just don't. That's that. Our first on the road episode was probably a little chaotic, but I think we did a good job.
Totes my goats.
All right.